Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Ari Lax, and this week we're taking a step back into Legacy in advance of a few pretty major East Coast events coming up, including the actual North American Legacy Champs. Today I am testing out a deck that a good friend of mine, Danny Batterman, kind of the person I trust for all the Eternal formats, sent to me saying that he's been winning with this in his West Coast Legacy tournaments. And this deck is Maverick. Let's talk about why Maverick might actually be successful in current Legacy. So, if you look at Magic on Legacy results, it's actually the format's devolved pretty badly since Miracles left the format to a lot of Delver decks. Um, just like the difficulty of exploiting Wasteland and all this stuff is definitely big. So, what that means is that some of the raw, powerful, unfair nonsense that the Maverick decks have had issues with in the past is really held down. And then this is kind of just the traditional like re-leveling of those matchups, which is your opponent's got blue cards in the deck, and then you cut the blue cards and you put in good green and white cards, and you beat your opponent up with good threats like this. Um, Maverick versus Death and Taxes. The Maverick creatures are a little more resilient to specific hate cards like Forked Bolt, Dread of Night, things like that. Like the one toughness punishers have really messed up Death and Taxes over the years, and this deck has a lot less issues with that. So to kind of break down what's happening, you've got it's like a bit of white and a bit of green. There's not a better way to describe this deck. You've got your like Death and Taxes half of the deck, and then you splice it into a Green Sun Zenith deck. So on the white side, the numbers are a little trimmed relative to Death and Taxes. So you got like 3 Mother of Runes because you're relying on other 1-drops in other situations. Still 4th Thalia because it's the best disruptive one, though I think based on my experiences with Modern, I'm actually going to find myself trimming these post-Sideboard and some of the more fair matchups, especially on the draw. Um, just kind of a liability. On the play, it's fine to just like, oh, they cast 1 Ponder, slam Thalia, good luck, have fun. Um, but on the draw, I think it's easy enough for them to have extended a couple lands if they're a Delver deck. Um, it's hard for you to like. You have to have very specific draws to like put them back on lands and then Thalia to shut them out. It's not like your Risha Import deck where you can actually choke them for having very few lands. It's a lot harder. And then you have Stoneforge Mystic. You're not relying on this card. Um, you're actually kind of just expecting it to die, which is why there's no Batterskull. You don't want this dead card in your hand in a non-Brainstorm deck because you have nothing to do with Batterskull for a long time. Um, Death and Taxes is a little bit different in that aspect where you actually need like the effect Batterskull provides is super unique in Death and Taxes where you just have like, oh, I'm going to like slam this 4/4. I don't have any other huge giant 4/4s in my deck capable of taking over a game, whereas this deck has all the green cards it can rely on in that slot. So it doesn't quite need that effect. It would rather just not draw the dead card, not tutor for the dead card, and just have cards that it can cast and win the game with. So Jite, Sword of Fire, and Ice. Moving on to the mana dorks. So you got 2 nobles and 3 death rights. The reason for that is actually that you are a Knight of the Reliquary deck. Death Right is definitely the better card. There's no one questioning that. But multiple Death Rights when you are a Knight deck is actually kind of a liability. You're starting to like having to eat your own Knights, fuel to make mana. It's just kind of a mess. So a little more consistency, or I don't know if it's kind of weird to say that your split becoming less likely to draw a specific card is more consistent, but you are more likely to be able to fully utilize the effect here. You've got a Sylvan Safekeeper as a tutor target that lets you kind of get a Mother of Runes. That's basically your 4th Mother of Runes, honestly. But it lets you do some cool stuff. You can Knight or the Reliquary burn someone out. You can use it to protect your hate cards. It's kind of the most important one. Preemptively get it to protect other creatures that you'll get in the future. Just generally a reasonable card. Kind of funny that this was like the most delayed invitational card, but it's one of the ones that's lasted the longest. I mean, Snapcaster Mage I think is lived its usefulness or live longer in terms of usefulness. I think Meddling Mage has 2, but or I guess maybe not live longer, maybe outshone in terms of usefulness. But Sylvan Safekeeper is one of those invitational cards that's quietly just hanging out. I think that, as a matter of fact, you are basically obligated to use the old school version of the invitational cards because I think it's just completely disrespectful that any of the new ones have alternate art. Anyways, that's that rant. You got Pride Mages to pick off the random artifacts of Legacy. Scrib Ranger, A card that you can use to double down on Mother of Runes. You can use to double down on Knight. We'll get to that in a little bit. It can also just kind of boost your mana in future turns. Protection from blue isn't as relevant as it used to be, but it can still block down a Delver. Just does a bunch of really nice stuff. Some scavenging uses is still a graveyard format to some extent, so this card will take over certain games. A bunch of knights. This card's just super powerful. A tireless tracker as kind of your assured value thing that you can just find and then play a land and grind up value. And then a Ramunap Excavator as actually a real lock piece in Legacy. I expect to see a lot more of this interaction in the years to come. Just the ability to tutor for a way to recur Wastelands is very powerful. I mean, actually, one of the things worth noting is this deck's very good at repeatedly wastelanding your opponent because of Knight and Ramunap. Beyond the Green Sun Zenith, which is by far probably the best card in the deck, honestly. I mean, Deathrite Shaman, but who's counting? You have 4 swords. You do need to interact with your opponent's creatures somehow. Onto the lands, a bunch of fetch duels. You are not playing black basics. Worth noting, there are no abrupt decays in the deck, and the reason is that your mana gets really messed up if you try to cast it. You're really just a white-green deck that has access to black mana for Deathrite Shaman and sideboard cards. You don't want to have games where you get wastelanded off of your mana, or you're like, oh, I can't stack this land tonight to wasteland them. You just want to be able to do your thing and be as unconstrained by your options as possible to disrupt your opponent as best as possible. Your Knight tutor base, so you've got a Dryad Arbor. That's really a Green Sun Zenith tutor base, honestly. It's your way to jump the curve as a mana dork. Karakas against legendary creatures like the Show and Tell decks, Sneak Attack decks. Horizon Canopy as a way to turn a land into cards. Wastelands, obviously want 4 of those to bury your opponent in cards. I could see a world where there'd be like 1 Rishon Import in the deck, but yeah. I'm going to trust these numbers for now. And then you have Thespian Sage Dark Depths. That is just kind of your way to turbo out a kill in a lot of spots. Worth noting that against lands, if they extend to Dark Depths, you can just tutor up Thespian Stage and stage them, which is awesome. You'll notice no other like hard lock cards in lands, no Maze Abyss, no Glacial Chasms. That's not what this deck's trying to do. If you start getting into those defensive positions, you're probably going to lose. Same with Tabernacle. That would be interesting in very specific spots. I think that those spots, it might be too slow to find, because I think crop rotation is really what enables lands to use a lot of those cards as combo interaction. Moving to the sideboard, Thoughtseize is a huge benefit to black, especially because, so I was mentioning that the black mana is not something you want to lean on if you're going to be attacked by opponents using wastelands, but not only have these decks traditionally suffered in spots where they are unable to interact fast enough for to stop their opponent's combo, which Thoughtseize just does a lot of the time. The combo decks aren't going to be wastelanding you, so just having a Thoughtseize against them is basically guaranteed. You're not punished for having a duel. That's a really nice addition to the deck compared to the old green-white list. 3 Zealous Persecutions. The first 2 are to handle True Name Nemesis and Young Pyromancer. The last one is specifically to beat up on opposing Death and Taxes decks and against Elves, which is traditionally one of the worst matches for these kinds of decks, so overloading there is fine. You have Containment Priest as just this... This card's just awesome. It just does everything. It beats like Show and Tell, Elves, Dredge. This card's just great. Some Surgicals. Again, it is a graveyard format. You do need to disrupt decks like lands in ways that Containment Priest doesn't. So you got some Surgicals there. Also fine against combo in certain instances. You can mess up some weird stuff. Some bonus combo hate with Teague and Canonist. Teague not in the main deck specifically because a lot of time you're trying to Green Sun Zenith and people aren't trying to do that kind of weird stuff against you. This card is good against like Elves because it cuts off their Zeniths and their natural orders. It's good against Storm, but not a lot else outside of that spectrum. Council's Judgment is a kind of generic handle anything, including True Name, though because you're leaning on Persecutions, you don't necessarily need it against a lot of the Pyromancer decks with True Name. And then a Sword of War and Peace is just kind of another breakthrough card in the matchups where your opponent's playing white and red creatures. Pretty straightforward. I'm excited to play some disruptive white creatures and not worry about Brainstorm. I would definitely be... I've not played Legacy in a little while. I would not say that my Brainstorm mechanics are not rusty, but I wouldn't feel terrible playing it. But just doing this, getting some land, mana denial in, I feel pretty comfortable doing that.